Hey, hope you guys are doing well and everything's going good. I recently saw a video that really got me to think, and it was particularly on how he worded it a little bit different, but I'm going to word it like this. Nobody gives a fuck about us with autism, okay? Like, the neurotypicals do not. That might sound like such a strange thing to say, but I'd really like to explain myself to hopefully get my point across on why I feel this way. So one of my biggest experiences wasn't too long ago. I had a job coach, and I remember him telling me, and this was supposed to be for people with disabilities, which is ironic. But he was wrong about a lot of things. But one of the biggest things that I was really wrong about was he would tell me whenever I did job interviews to like present my best image, right? And he told me to act a certain way, because if I come in with all these accommodations, then they're not going to want to hire me. And that might have been true. And at the same time, my biggest argument is, well, that's a hell of an assumption. And then that also might create other problems, right? Like, what if I throw, something on them later on? And that's exactly what happened, right? Where he's like, well, tell them after you get hired. I remember I told this guy that when I worked at Wendy's, this one manager, super nice guy, by the way. But I remember telling him about some of the accommodations I would need. And I remember him telling me in the most polite way, hey, it feels like you're throwing all of this on me all of a sudden. Like, and, if I'm happy to do that, if I was to know ahead of time, I would have been able to better accommodate you. And that was a very good point because he was right. It was being thrown on him. And it was at the advice of this, quite frankly, this kind of shitty job coach who did not care to listen to what I have to say, would try to correct me at every point, and was quite frankly very misinformed, though well-meaning. I remember, for me, I think a big part of my life is I like structure. I like to know what's going on with things, right? I like to know when things are happening, why, and how they're happening. And I remember with the job coach, they would always lay out expectations like, I'll see you every week or something like that. But then they wouldn't follow up with me. And not only that, they just wouldn't check on me. They wouldn't do any of that. It was like, if I wanted anything, I had to reach out. And I get that. But at the same time, it's incredibly frustrating to feel like you have to go the extra mile to get the help that you need when you're already struggling. And that was something that, quite frankly, really bothered me about having a job coach like that, because it was clear to me that they weren't trained to deal with autistic individuals. Like, I've met a lot of job coaches who are like, they're kind of trained in like very generalized areas. However, not really in too specific. They're just not. And it really sucks. And it hurts a lot to deal with people like that, because then you're like, what the heck? Like, what's going on here? And I think that's really important to understand is you kind of have to shop around a little bit. Because even with this job coach, like they were under the assumption that multitasking was a real thing. But really what it is, from my understanding, is your brain rapidly shifting its attention between two or more activities. And multitasking, as we know, is not the most efficient way to get things done. You can still do things, but it's like when you give something your full attention, you'll probably pick up on details better, and you'll also be able to absorb the material a lot better. It's not to say that it can't be done. It's just to say that it might not be the best way to do things if you're looking to absorb the material. So that was like the first real thing that sort of made me go like, well, what's going on here? Because I remember clearly several times trying to communicate what I was feeling. And it seems like everything was understood through the lens that, like, I'm a person with a disability, right? I just never felt like I was being taken seriously, or that I was just seen as if, like, my thoughts and opinions, because of my disabilities, that I was lesser than. And it really it fucking frustrated me to, like, feel like I wasn't being taken seriously, and more so that, had the words I said or the logic I used come from somebody else, like, they would have actually listened. If this came from a doctor, some of the things I said, they might listen. It's like I was less credible by default to the neurotypicals, and that really didn't feel fair at all to me. I remember growing up, I ended up having a lot of meltdowns growing up in my household. And one of the biggest issues was that my family really never knew what was going on or cared to learn. It was always framed as like an issue of I'm throwing a temper tantrum. And you'll see that a lot with neurotypicals is like they misinterpret so many things and they see it through the lens of what they think it might be, right? Like, for example, if you're confused about something, you might be seen as stupid. I remember a lot of times I would ask about topics or things in detail because I wanted to make sure I fully understood the concepts. And people would get mad at me for daring to ask, for daring to try to understand stuff. And things would be explained to me and I wouldn't really get it. And then it's like very clear that they'd lose their patience with me very clearly. I have tried, and that's the thing. It's like I've always been told to try harder, but it's like people don't realize how hard you try when you're autistic. People don't realize how hard you try to fit in, to mold yourself into the world. I mean, like job after job after job, I would mass apply to multiple places, and I would go in super excited, and I would try my best or my damnedest, and then it would just turn out that like the job just didn't accommodate me. It's like I had a choice where I either had to heavily mask or if I just be myself, which is the biggest lie I've ever been told. Just be yourself, right? I know what happens when I just be myself. That might work for you because society is more willing to accept you. It does not work for me if I want to be loved and accepted. That's the truth. If I want to be loved and accepted by this like society, I can't be myself. Because when I'm myself, I'm labeled as retarded. When I'm myself, I'm labeled as lazy. When I'm myself, I'm labeled as having an attitude problem anytime I have a meltdown. So I bottle it up, I suppress it, and then I just hide it in one way or another. And that's super frustrating because I shouldn't have to do that. And neither should anybody else out there. You should get the privilege, as some people will call it, but I say the right to be able to authentically express yourself, however that might look. I'm not excusing having a meltdown, and at the same time, that's what part of autism is usually. That's just part of what it usually is. I don't like this idea that like we'll accept certain parts of a mental health diagnosis, but we don't accept other parts. Some parts are understandable and even acceptable, and the other parts, you can't do that, right? It's like we get mad at them the same way we get mad at somebody else who didn't have a diagnosis, because some people really do throw temper tantrums. For me, I was just having a meltdown. But nobody cared to ask. That was the problem. Nobody cared to try to check up on me. I just got called retarded and made fun of and stuff and bullied by people who objectively I would never want to hang out with because they were just mean people. They didn't understand it, so they judged what they couldn't understand. And all I wanted was some friends. And unfortunately, I didn't get that, which is not cool. And so I learned that I was really unemployable by traditional means. Like a 9 to 5 job was just not going to be something I could hold without sucking out the entirety of my soul. And I realized that really early on that try as I might, the truth is I'm disabled. And it's a part of my identity. It's part of who I am. I can still do stuff though. It's just not by the same playing field as other people. And that's something like for if you have a severe disability, because I didn't just have autism, I have severe crippling anxiety as well. And if if you happen to have like a severe mental or physical illness, then it is very limiting. And so instead of trying to force yourself, you have to, for your long-term well-being, you got to find a workaround. And for me, it's like this. It's like making YouTube videos or cleaning around the apartment or, maybe talking to people and checking up on friends and stuff. Or maybe, doing a hobby or something. But, like I work out and stuff. But it's just not the 9 to 5. And I've had people try every which way to Sunday to try to tell me that, I have to, right? It's just another way to try to conform into society. And, capitalism definitely doesn't let you ethically explore who you are. Instead, it beats you down over and over again and tries to get you to conform to the status quo. And I don't think that you have to. I think it's completely unfair and I reject the notion that this is how I have to live my life. And I think, that's something important because when I have met people who are kind, when I have met people who are loving, they have been willing to accommodate me. They have been willing to show me care and compassion. They've been willing to do multiple things. I've met people who will go above and beyond. I've met people who will just meet the bare minimum, and even that's good enough. I've tried so hard to fit into society. It's time. It's a little bit. It's time to get a little bit back after I gave so much. When you give, you're supposed to receive, and yet my whole life I never received. And the truth is, it was never enough, right? No matter what, eventually, I was going to crumble from the immense amount of pressure. And the truth was, I was going to have a meltdown. Like I could only keep up the game for so long. And then inevitably it would come back full circle where people would just like label me as rude, retarded, stupid, mean, all these types of things because of their lack of understanding. And, in the place of their ignorance, they filled it in with what they thought was going on. And that really frustrates me. Even as I describe these things, you're not really going to get it. It's not really going to resonate with you unless you are a person who's autistic and you hear this, and hopefully this message will tell you like, oh my God, that's me. And, you're more able to closely relate and pick up what I'm putting down. But for a typical, this might not even mean all that much. They might hear it and think they get it, but you're never really going to get it. And that's not to be rude, but that's just the truth. That's what it is. And, I just noticed really that I got severely punished for ever acting doing the just be yourself thing. It's like anytime, like, sometimes, like, for example, like I really would get excited or something. I was told I was annoying by my mom, for example. She'd tell me to shut up or, to stop talking so much. Or, it's the same way with my family. Like my brothers were also super shitty to me, and they'd be like, "Why are you like talking so much?" And it was like I had to, I learned a very powerful lesson, which is if I'm myself, then I'm going to get punished for that. And, those punishments were a way of saying, like, hey, if you're that way, that's bad. But if you're this way, we won't hurt you, right? It was like using negative reinforcement. And I never got the positive reinforcement part, which is really the crappy part about it. Nobody ever really told me good job or, hey, we noticed what you did there. It was just like to be expected. When really it was immense difficulty like doing the things they asked of me. And at the very least, if they were gonna fuck me like that, I would have just liked to thank you. But of course, expecting anything from neurotypicals in that situation was honestly my bad. I don't know why I did. But I did. I kind of got my hopes up like I usually did in that spot. The truth is, it wasn't just neurotypicals, but I also noticed that because I am a vulnerable person, that, I could fall hard for people who, they didn't even have to be narcissists or psychopaths, but just like there were certain people, like I knew this guy Jackson. I think his real name is Levi, if I remember correctly. But him and I at one point lived together, and before that we hung out all the time. For years, I kicked it with this dude, and I remember like the whole time he was super abusive, and he would just call me stupid. I remember one time, like I think it was like the Cadillac, I forgot to lock it. He was worried something would happen to it, and he threatened to beat me up and hurt me really bad. And it's like, where did that come from, dude? Or like if I didn't understand stuff, he'd be like, how many times do I have to repeat myself? And I just learned that like there were certain people who would take advantage of that. Or like if I went to try to buy a used car or something, people would very quickly take advantage of that too. It's just like, because I just am trusting and kind of gullible in some senses, what people tell me. Maybe I am. I just don't, or maybe it's that I don't like question everything, and I don't think of everybody as if I need to be on guard. And I don't think I should have to be on guard and have people prove their innocence to me in every interaction. I think that's more a reflection of like our corrupt late stage capitalistic society than it is of my mindset. I think my mindset is very healthy, actually, personally. I think we live in a disordered society that encourages people to take advantage of other people. And when we talk about success, the only thing we really talk about is how much money do you make, right? Like, what do you do for a living? And then like if you list like something like a burger flipper or stuff, it's like, oh, that's not a career. And the main reason that's not a real job is because it doesn't pay a livable wage. And that's really fucking shitty. And anytime people say they made it, the first thing they usually mean is they made it in terms of money. It's like we're very good about talking about money, but we never talk about like family relationships. How's your relationship with your kids? I've known a lot of successful like lawyers who they end up getting divorced. The wife goes out and fucks another guy, and they only get to see their kids at best and get weekend custody because the wife was the one doing all the raising the kids, taking the kids to all the sporting events and activities. And I just didn't like that. I didn't like that a large part of society hammers in, especially if like, they see you as a biological male or something like that. They see you as a man, right? Like traditionally within like especially like a conservative space, which I was raised in, it was understood that you're the provider and you got to work hard and you got to be self-made and do it by any means necessary. And like even like now the sigma male grind set mentality that's being spread, it's like work 60 hours a day. It just it's not everything it's cracked up to be. I crave so much more than just making a career my whole hobby or my life. I'm a culmination of like my friends and my spirituality and my hobbies and everything else. And the truth is, one thing that's been liberating not working the 9 to 5 is that I get more time to do studies and I get more time to talk to you guys, you people, and talk about what it is I'm feeling and what it is that I want to do in my life. And what I really want to do is this. Not only do I not want to do the 9 to 5, even if I do it, it's just not worth it. Like it physically drains everything out of me, and I hate it. And if I was given the option, like guaranteed, no worries about finances or anything, do you want to do 9 to 5? I was like, no, I don't want to. I can be productive in other ways, and I am productive in other ways. I think I'm an okay partner. I think I'm a pretty good pet owner. I think I'm a pretty decent friend. I think I'm pretty good at keeping up in the household chores. I think I'm a pretty decent gamer. I think I'm very good at doing research on psychology. I think I'm very good at being there for people. And I really couldn't do that because the truth is, like, I could theoretically pull off the 9 to 5, but the problem is because I'm so neurodivergent, then I have to mold myself so hard to that it drains me. And I don't, and the other fact is like that most jobs might put up with it once or twice or 3 times, but you can't keep calling off of work and expect a job to let you stay there. You can't, they'll fire your ass. And so, even when you're not feeling like, even when you can't do it physically, you have to go in there and show up because you have no other option according to them. So, it's not like, some days, they have grace with you. It's not that way at all. Maybe to a certain extent, but I have not met many jobs where, you could just call off and they'd be like, yeah, we understand. I haven't. Usually the understanding is you show up and, you work and we're not going to thank you because that's what you should be doing. It's like, fuck, man, can I just get a little bit of thank you? I mean, I've had jobs legit just pay me, way less than other people. I remember like working really hard, and that's something that I was always told is like, if you just work really hard, then you'll make it. But I remember being a dishwasher for, I won't say the specific company or the person's name, but I remember being a dishwasher for a certain company, and I remember getting paid less than everybody else there, and I'm pretty sure it was because I disclosed that I was autistic. It's like they just, it's like the moment you disclose that, it's like people talk to you a certain way, that, hey, how are you doing, buddy voice, right? And I remember like pointing out like, hey, what's the incentive for me to work hard? Because I did silverware, I didn't have to, but like there was a worker I had, Nate, and he was just such a lazy bum. He still is. I did not like Nate. I did not like Nate now. I never will like Nate. He would make weird, cringy jokes, say stupid things, And he wouldn't work half the time. He'd walk around, goof off. He'd talk to people outside, take 45-minute hour breaks. And, I remember like just being in there, and I'd work all the time. I'd bust my ass. I'd take care of dramas. I would take silverware. I'd even roll it, when I had enough time. I'd even roll the fucking silverware. Like I would do everything that was required of me. But it was like, it was never enough. It's just like I was being spread thin. And despite the amount of effort I put in, this guy was getting paid almost $2 more an hour than me, which is like a lot when you're struggling. Those extra $2 go a long way. You figure 40 hours, right? That's an extra $80 at the end of every paycheck. Like that shit adds up. 8, 16, 20 for 32, that's extra $320. And that's not including this other guy who I think he definitely was fun to work with. He was objectively way better about it. And at the same time, he still didn't work as hard as me. And I made less than this other guy who I actually am still friends with, so I'm not going to mention his name. And that's not a knock on him. I think that's exactly what they wanted us to do, is to argue amongst each other instead of looking at management and be like, why are the good workers not getting paid? Because I had this guy named Gravy, and he worked with me. And the dude ended up quitting within a week because of some bullshit they pulled. And the same for this other kid who was younger, and he ended up quitting. And then they had one guy come in, and he didn't even make it out, the orientation, and, he ended up quitting. And it's like, they just had a bunch of people come in and quit, and they kept asking, why doesn't nobody want to work? And it's like, have you ever tried doing an exit interview, asking them, why did you quit? Why did you leave? Asking and then writing it down. And, it would have been very simple to look for common themes and to tell, like, okay, this keeps happening. What can we do in the future to decrease the likelihood of this persisting? Anything like that would have helped tremendously. But like, no, that's not going to happen. It just bothered me. And I think, if you're out there, this message is for you guys. Like if you're on the spectrum, or even if you just have any type of mental illness, don't beat yourself up. Don't be mean to yourself. This world, like these people, these are not these guys out there, the neurotypicals, they don't get to tell you what's right and wrong. Oftentimes they'll state opinions as facts. And even if it's a commonly held belief, that's all it is. It's not the one way, the one truth. So don't let people tell you that. I don't see my condition as a disorder of the mind. I just see it as a different way of thinking. And I like my way of thinking. I feel like I'm a lot more compassionate. I understand more abstract ideas. And when I do pick up on something, I'm very good at doing it eventually. I have a way of looking at the world that's different, and I like that, and I have special interests, and I have like hobbies that, like, if it's like something that I really like, I can spend hours studying and days and weeks, and I can have a crazy work ethic on the things that really matter to me. So it's not that I'm lazy, and that's what I've been told my whole life. You're lazy. It's just that some things are not worth the squeeze. The juice isn't worth the squeeze of everything. Some activities are so unbearable that even if I did my 100% damnedest, the best I would get out of it is like a day where I'm so exhausted I get to do nothing coming home. So don't let people be mean to you. Don't let people tell you like, oh, you're a piece of crap or any of that shit. You do you, boo. And remember, like, you should love yourself. All right, later, guys.